On the morning of May 19, 1536, a cold wind moved across Tower Green. A woman stepped onto the scaffold, slowly, deliberately. She carried herself with the dignity of a queen, a name the world tried to erase. Mist drifted from the River Thames, soft, pale, unreal. The crowd waited in silence, heavier with every breath. The French executioner stood ready, calm, precise, still. Then, Anne Boleyn lifted her gaze and simply smiled. Not in fear, not in defeat, but quiet defiance. This is not the story of a villain. This is the story of the queen they tried to erase. She was not born into power. Her story began in the English countryside, far from the throne. A restless mind meant for more. Everything changed when she was sent to France. A court alive with music, language, art, whispers behind silk. In France, she learned the world's secrets. Queens negotiating with a glance, ambassadors bending truth with a smile. She absorbed it all: languages, diplomacy, poise, strategy. A rare education for any woman. When she returned, the court saw something different. Not beauty, but presence, quiet confidence, fire in her eyes. She wasn't the most traditionally beautiful, but she had something sharper: charisma, intellect, a mind brighter than any jewel. Henry noticed immediately, drawn to the woman who didn't bow, didn't chase him, didn't surrender. When he approached, she refused to be his mistress. One word, one choice, reshaped history. A refusal that tore apart a kingdom, split a church, reshaped England. The rise of Anne Boleyn had begun. The court was divided, whispers circling the halls, and the king consumed by pride and obsession. No counsel could calm him, no prayer could reach him. Only fire remained in his eyes, burning through every word of reason. Rome refused his demand. The Pope would not bend to his will. The throne trembled as parchment carried across seas, sealed in crimson wax, spoke of a kingdom tearing itself apart. Anne watched from the shadows, behind lattice and candlelight. Her crown felt heavier than ever. Each whisper, cut deeper than the last. She had won a king, but lost the world that once adored her. Within the church's stone corridors, men whispered of judgment, of sin, of vengeance cloaked in faith. Rumors became weapons and forgiveness, a distant echo, beneath the flicker of a single candle flame. Henry broke from Rome, burned the old faith, and crowned himself the head of a new one. The fire devoured the letter, and with it, centuries of devotion. The king had won his crown, but damned his soul in the process. The people rose, not with swords, but with belief. Torches blazed beneath the castle gates. The kingdom burned, not from war, but from faith itself. And through the smoke, Anne's fate began to seal in silence. Anne walked through the halls of her own making. Walls that once whispered praise, now echoed only silence. Her crown unseen, yet heavier than gold. Each step, a reminder of the price she'd paid for power. Love turned into judgment. Vows became weapons. The king's eyes no longer sought her heart, but her obedience. Between them, a ring once shining with promise, now glimmered like a curse. And in the dim light, before God and witness, they sealed a union that would one day destroy them both. The flame that joined their hands was the same that would burn their names. Over England, the storm gathered, silent, patient, inevitable. No thunder yet, only the trembling of heaven, watching the rise of a doomed crown. They crowned her queen, amid gold and prayers and envy, but her throne was built on bones of faith, and betrayal, and as the crown touched her brow, the prophecy began to breathe. The crowd cheered, yet behind their cries, the kingdom trembled. The cheers of the living echoed the silence of the condemned. For every voice that praised her name, another whispered her ruin. She gave birth to a daughter, not the son the king demanded, but a child who would one day change the world. In her arms, hope flickered softly, a light the darkness could not yet see. Days turned into whispers, whispers into doubt, and in that silence, she felt the first shadow of her fall. The crown still gleamed, but her fate had already been written. Whispers began in the dark, words dressed as loyalty, but poisoned by ambition. They leaned toward the candle, trading fears for promises, not knowing every word would one day be used against her. Whispers became daggers, slipped between friends, and turned toward the queen. Behind her back, stories grew teeth. Every laugh in the corridor carried the echo of her name, twisted and sharpened. There were eyes in every corridor, mouths behind every smile, men who owed her everything, now waited for her to fall. In the dark, her enemies counted her breaths, measuring the distance. To her downfall, the king's love grew cold, replaced by silence, sharp as a blade. Arguments turned to distance, and distance turned to doubt. For the first time, she saw in his eyes a world where she no longer existed. She prayed not for mercy, but for truth to be seen. Before the flame died, her hands trembled, but her faith did not. If God still listened to kings, surely he heard their queens as well. Her child slept in peace, wrapped in light and silence, unaware the world outside conspired to erase her mother. The cradle rocked softly, while history sharpened its quill. Men of power met in secret, rewriting her story. Before it was even over, they weighed her life against their own survival and decided the queen was worth less than their fear. And with a single letter, sealed in wax and betrayal, her fate was sent riding through the night. Beneath a sky that did not care, by dawn, the charges would be written, and the crown would begin to crack. He broke the seal, and with it broke his restraint. Words once written in love, now burned like poison on his hands. The same hand that once held her heart, now trembled with rage. The queen's name had become his curse. Anne walked alone through the morning mist, where whispers hid behind every breath, the air heavy, as if England itself held its breath. Somewhere in that silence, her fate was already being written. There were eyes in every corridor, and mouths behind every smile. Once they bowed to her crown, now they waited for her fall. Even her reflection no longer felt her own. In the darkness, ink became weapon. Confessions were forged. Before sins were ever spoken, men of faith turned fear into scripture and sealed her downfall in candlelight. Then came the echo of armor, boots against stone, prayers against silence. The Queen of England was no longer a wife, but a sentence to be read aloud. She turned and saw no God, only men. The light in her eyes met the shadow of the crown, and in that breath, Anne Boleyn understood. Love had built the very cage she could never escape. The river carried her, not as a queen, but as a prisoner of her own crown. The tower waited in silence, its walls remembering every cry that power ever swallowed. And as dawn broke, the wind itself refused to speak her name. 2 torches marked her path. Each step echoed like confession. The gate opened, not to freedom, but to history's cruelest room. Behind her, the world was still. Before her, only judgment remained. In the cold stone light, Anne bowed her head, not to beg, but to remember. Every sin they named was once a promise she believed, and still, her hands did not tremble. One tear fell, not for herself, but for the child, who would grow up learning her name in whispers. She was not broken, only seen by a world that had already chosen its villain. The hall stood still, 1,000 eyes, but no one truly looked. Her voice, calm, clear, a storm trapped in prayer. "I am innocent," she said, and the silence agreed, but could not speak. The verdict came, as gentle as snow and just as cold. No sword was drawn, no mercy offered, only words, signed by the man who once called her love. Her crown was now a wound that England would never heal. The throne stood alone. The candle beside it flickered. As if ashamed, no king sat there, only power pretending to be divine. And in that stillness, the Queen of England waited for her dawn. And the throne remained empty, waiting for the silence to finish her story. And in the hush that followed, the Queen said nothing. Her crown was already gone, but her gaze still carried the weight of it. Every whisper, every glance, cut deeper than the sword that awaited her. They spoke as if she were not there, men writing destiny, while the woman who bore it sat in silence. The trial was over, but her sentence had been spoken long before. Judgment was already written, not in ink, but in fear. For power fears what it cannot control, and Anne was the last voice it could not tame. And the man who once called her love sat in silence, the same silence he gave to God when he made himself the answer to his own prayers, his eyes heavy with conviction and something that almost looked like sorrow. The ink fell, heavier than the blade, every stroke sealing a fate he'd once sworn was divine. Kings do not bleed when they kill, they only write. And so, the tower waited for the sound of footsteps, for the rustle of silk, for the crown to fall. History held its breath. And when dawn finally came, England would never see her light the same way again. The morning air was colder than memory. Anne Boleyn walked between the walls that once crowned her. No tears, no cries, only the sound of her own heart echoing across the stone. Even the sky refused to break. In another room, the executioner waited, his hands steady, his eyes hollow. The sword glimmered faintly, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. And in that mirror, mercy had no reflection. She knelt before the silence. Her lips moved, not for forgiveness, but for peace. "I forgive them all," she whispered, "and may God have mercy on my soul." The crowd trembled, but the Queen did not. The executioner took his place. Anne lifted her gaze toward heaven and smiled. Even the birds refused to watch. The blade fell through history, and time held its breath. Then silence became eternal. A single flame flickered in the dark. Her shadow lingered beside it. She was gone, but her light remained. She did not vanish. She became light itself. In the quiet that followed, a child slept, wrapped in gold, bearing her mother's name. The crown was gone, but the blood remembered. History was already dreaming. Years later, a young girl opened a book. Her name was Elizabeth, and in that silence, she found her mother's voice. The daughter of the condemned would become the queen of an empire. For Anne Boleyn did not die. She was rewritten in the blood of a legend. The sun rose again over the towers that once heard her mother's last breath. And there, beneath that same sky, walked a child of the condemned. The world saw a girl, but destiny saw a queen. From the silence of a grave came the echo of a legacy. Years turned, the girl became the crown, but she carried a single relic, a dark pearl bound in gold, the heart her mother once wore, not as sorrow, but as proof that blood remembers. For though history burned her name, her daughter wore it in fire. In the still glass, two queens watched each other. One carved in memory, the other carved in time. A mother who was erased, and a daughter who rewrote the ink. And for a fleeting breath, the past forgave the present. The candle flickered beside her face. It had burned once before when the world called her traitor. Now it burned again as the world called her mother. The same flame, new meaning. The same silence, new voice. Time closed its pages, but her light refused to dim. Anne's story, once buried, rose in the crown her child would wear. And though the candle trembles, its flame endures. For in every silence, her name still whispers. Anne lives forever. History remembers the crown, but never forgets the silence beneath it. And so the world moved on, turning page after page, forgetting the ink that once bled for her. But history has a pulse. It waits, it remembers, and one day it breathes again. From the ashes of a name rose the echo of a daughter, not to avenge, but to finish the sentence left unsaid. And there, in the silence, the flame returned, not in defiance, but in peace. The light that once trembled now burns steady. For every truth they tried to bury found its way through fire. And in that fire, a name survived. Anne Boleyn. Her story is no longer a tragedy, the beginning of memory itself. History remembers the crown, but never forgets the silence beneath it.